BT Superfast Fibre 1. It's faster than our standard fibre and now only $27.99 a month with no upfront costs. Plus, for total peace of mind, it comes with a £20 money-back speed guarantee. At just $27.99 a month, it's worth every penny. Hurry, offer ends 13th of October. 24-month contract, broadband only, new customers, CPI plus 3.9% increase each March, $32.99 per month, 25, terms apply.
LBC News. Latest travel, next.
Ah. Oh. What? Oh, come on. Ugh.
Even if you're not ready, our tyres are. Master the unpredictable weather all year round with the Michelin Cross Climate 2 tyre and drive with confidence. Find the right tyres for your vehicle at quitfit.com and drive away happy every time.
The news in 20 minutes. Every 20 minutes. 24 hours a day. Where the news never stops. This is LBC News.
From Global's newsroom, it is 6:22. I'm John Stratford. Here are your headlines tonight. Liz Truss has spoken to President Zelensky, telling him that Ukraine can count on Britain's support. At least 11 people have been killed in long-range missile strikes that Russia has waged on several Ukrainian cities, including Kiev, the capital, which hasn't been targeted for months. President Putin says the strikes are retaliation for what he's called terrorist acts. This follows the weekend's bombing of a key bridge connecting Russia and Crimea. The Chancellor has bowed to pressure and brought forward publication of his financial strategy. Kwasi Kwarteng will now make his fiscal statement 3 weeks earlier than planned on October 31st. Nicola Sturgeon has told the party conference of the SNP in Scotland that it can make independence work and not let anyone else say otherwise. The First Minister and SNP leader has admitted there will be many challenges along the way. We'll get the latest from Aberdeen in just a moment. And the British sprinter CJ Uja has been banned for 22 months after testing positive for 2 prohibited substances at the Tokyo Olympics. He has been cleared, though, of intentionally taking prohibited drugs. Team GB had already been stripped of the men's 4x100 metre silver medal.
LBC News. Travel.
LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff. It's heavy in West Lothian. The M8 westbound is partly blocked between junction 4A for the Heartlands interchange and junction 5 for Shotts because of an accident. There are queues in West Yorkshire. The M62 westbound stays closed between junction 28 for Tingley and 27 for Gilderson. That's because of a diesel spillage. In Leicestershire, the A14 eastbound stays closed between the M1 and junction 1 for Welford. That's because of an accident. There are delays. It's heavy in Hertfordshire on the M1 northbound. There's a lane closed because of a spillage after junction 8 for Hemel Hempstead. There are also queues in Hertfordshire on the M25 anti-clockwise. There's a lane closed because of an accident after junction 22 for St Albans. And on the train, ScotRail are running a very limited service. That's because of the strike.
This is LBC News.
6:24 right now. Let's get more on the SNP conference, which has come to a close with Nicola Sturgeon, the party leader and First Minister of Scotland, addressing delegates in Aberdeen. Let's go live to the city right now. LBC's Jack Foster is there. And Nicola Sturgeon making the case for independence in 2022.
Yes, unsurprisingly, we expected to hear a lot of that from Nicola Sturgeon in the lead-up to this conference. She brought this conference to a close with a speech which we heard earlier on, lasting about an hour, and a standing ovation from delegates here in Aberdeen. The conference speech was light on big policy announcements, and indeed it's been a conference light on big policy announcements, I think it's fair to say. So the First Minister, the leader of the Scottish National Party, leaning into that rallying call for independence would be a good way to keep the delegates in the room happy, and it certainly seemed to. There was one policy announcement of note. The final instalment ahead of the extension of the child payment will be doubled from £130 to £260. She talked about that as being a small thing, but that perhaps might bring some Christmas cheer to struggling families. She spoke about Scotland's support for Ukraine. She criticised the Conservatives. She particularly focused on Suella Braverman's recent comments about her dream being an image of a plane taking refugees to Rwanda taking off on the front cover of the Telegraph, drawing a very clear line between her government's position on refugees She repeated the fact that she sees Scotland as being welcoming to refugees, in contrast to what she says is a less welcoming government in Westminster. But the take-home message from her big speech was that message about independence. But the message definitely felt as though she was speaking beyond those people who were just in the hall, with a real focus on allaying concerns that opponents of independence perhaps might have.
England, Scotland, Wales, the island of Ireland. We will always be the closest of friends. We will always be family. But we can achieve a better relationship, a true partnership of equals, when we win Scotland's independence.
Now, the acid test of the effectiveness of a big keynote speech at the end of a party conference is probably not going to be got from the delegates who were in the hall, but nevertheless, we can hear a little bit of that perhaps friendly response that the delegates in Aberdeen had following Nicola Sturgeon's speech.
It's great. That's what happens when you're actually at a conference and you're not sitting looking at a computer screen.
Wonderful policies coming forward, very forward thinking, very open-minded. Oh, inspiring. She never puts her foot wrong. She said everything we needed to hear.
I think it's very inspiring, and we're closer than we've ever been.
Was that the crescendo to the conference that it needed to be?
Yes.
So a lot of confidence from people emerging from Nicola Sturgeon's speech earlier on this evening. But we have heard a lot of that sort of thing before, that after these speeches that members are more confident than they've ever been before about independence being on the horizon. But as delegates return home, they do so with as many questions really hanging over that issue of the route to an independence referendum as there were really when they arrived here on Saturday. That Supreme Court decision on whether or not such a vote is within the Scottish Parliament's power is still to come. The arguments begin being heard tomorrow, in fact. And the so-called Plan B, which is to fight the next election or our next election as a de facto referendum on independence in the likely event that the Supreme Court finds against the Scottish Government, remains entirely theoretical. And despite the many discussions, the many resolutions and votes held here over the weekend, none of the detail of that very significant SNP plan for the coming years, and potentially that would shape the entire future of Scotland, has really had much of a look in.
And of course, over the conference weekend, Nicola Sturgeon came in for some criticism for that comment where she said that she detests the Tories. She's had to explain herself on that.
She has, yes. She refused yesterday when she was confronted by journalists here at the conference hall about it to apologise. She suggested perhaps that her words had been slightly misinterpreted, that she wasn't necessarily personally attacking Tories, rather Tory policy or the actions of the Tory party. But in truth, I don't think that her words have gone down particularly badly amongst the party faithful. In many ways, this is red meat to her supporters, and in reality, asking people here in the hall today and yesterday, I would say that we heard much stronger language. In support of similar arguments about the Tory party.
Jack Foster in Aberdeen. Thank you very much for bringing us the latest from the SNP conference.
Where the news never stops. LBC News.
So then, Russia has carried out its biggest airstrikes on Ukraine since the start of the invasion back in February. This has been described as a clear sign of desperation by the Prime Minister Liz Truss. Liz Truss has spoken to her Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, telling him that he can count on Britain's support. At least 10 people have died in those airstrikes. Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik, who leads the Golosh political party, told Tonight with Andrew Marr on LBC this evening that Ukraine needs more air defence systems.
The frustrating thing is, right now, on the 8th month of war, we are asking for the same thing that on the day one. We are asking for Air Force protection systems, and we are asking for the fighter jets. Because that would really make a difference. That will allow us not only to protect our cities, but also to protect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear station and the other nuclear stations, our infrastructure.
Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik there. President Putin says the strikes that he's carried out are retaliation for what he has called terrorist acts. This follows the bombing of that key bridge connecting Russia and Crimea over the weekend. A bridge he personally opened in 2018, built 4 years after the annexation of Crimea by Russia. This was President Putin speaking earlier to the Russian Security Council.
Leaving such crimes without response is simply impossible. This morning, on the proposal of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff, we have conducted a massive high-precision weapon strike from the sea and from land, aimed at Ukrainian military infrastructure, communication infrastructure, and so on. In case of continuation of terrorist attacks on our territory, we will respond in a very harsh manner, and we will respond in level with the level of threats posed against Russian Federation. Nobody should have any doubts about this. And I'm asking the Minister of Defense to provide a report.
As President Putin speaking earlier today, Dmytro Kuleba is the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister, and he has said this nonsense about Putin being provoked must stop. He does not need anything to provoke him in order to commit heinous crimes. President Biden of the United States has issued a statement saying the US strongly condemns Russia's missile strikes today across Ukraine. He says these attacks killed and injured civilians and destroyed targets with no military purpose. He says they once again demonstrate the utter brutality of Mr. Putin's illegal war on the Ukrainian people.
LBC News.
In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 31 points, 69.59. There's been another fall for the pound against the dollar. The pound will buy you $1.10.4 cents. That's down 0.6 of a cent on yesterday. And the pound will also buy you €1.13.8. That is broadly flat on yesterday. Let's get more on the business headlines of tonight with Victoria Scholar from Interactive Investor, and more on that news that Kwasi Kwarteng has bowed to pressure and brought forward the publication of